The arrival of the Starborn. The neon sky of Orionis 9 flickered with distant lightning as Eli Carter wiped the grease off his hands. He stood in the middle of a scrapyard, surrounded by piles of broken ships and rusted metal. It was another slow night, with nothing but the hum of the city in the background. Eli was just about to head inside his small workshop when a streak of silver light tore through the sky. It moved too fast, like a falling star, but bigger, much bigger. His heart pounded as he watched it crash into the desert, just beyond the scrapyard. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, the ground shook. A gust of hot wind blew across the scrapyard, rattling loose metal. Eli grabbed his flashlight and ran. The crashed pod. When Eli reached the crash site, his breath caught in his throat. A strange, silver pod lay half buried in the sand, steam rising from its surface. The pod wasn't like anything he had seen before. It was smooth, metallic, and pulsing with a faint blue glow. His fingers twitched. Curiosity burned inside him. Was it a lost cargo ship? A secret military project? Or something not from this world? He took a cautious step forward. Suddenly, the pod clicked. Eli froze. With a soft hiss, the pod's surface split open, revealing a hidden chamber inside. From the shadows of the pod, a figure emerged. She was tall, elegant, and completely alien. Her skin shimmered in the moonlight, a mix of deep blue and silver. Her golden eyes glowed softly, scanning the area with sharp awareness. Long, flowing hair cascaded down her back, moving slightly as if touched by an invisible breeze. Eli's mind screamed at him to run, but he stood frozen, staring at the mysterious woman. She staggered forward, clutching her side as if in pain. Then, in a soft but urgent voice, she spoke. Sivratil, Arcanus. Eli blinked. He had no idea what she just said. Before he could react, her legs gave out. She collapsed onto the sand. The shadows in the night. Eli hesitated only for a second before stepping forward. Whoever she was hurt. Hey, are you okay? He asked. He knew it was a dumb question. Of course, she wasn't okay. She just fell from the sky. He bent down, unsure if he should touch her. But just as his hand hovered near her shoulder, she gasped and grabbed his wrist. Her fingers were cold but strong. She looked into his eyes, desperate, terrified. Then she spoke again. This time, one word was clear. Run. Eli's stomach twisted. A metallic whirring sound filled the air. He turned his head and saw shadows moving in the distance. At first, he thought they were just desert scavengers. But then, red lights flickered in the darkness. No, these weren't scavengers. They were bounty hunters. The hunters arrive. A group of tall, armored figures stepped into the light. Their black exosuits gleamed, their faces hidden behind glowing red visors. The one in front, the tallest of them all, tilted his head slightly as if scanning the scene. Then he raised his arm, and a holographic targeting screen appeared. The bounty hunter pointed at the alien woman. Target confirmed. Secure her. Eliminate the witness. Eli felt a chill crawl up his spine. Witness. That meant him. Before he could react, the bounty hunters raised their weapons. The alien woman tightened her grip on Eli's wrist. With surprising strength, she pulled him back, just as a red energy blast struck the ground where he had been standing. Move, she shouted, her voice sharp with urgency. Eli didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed her arm, pulling her up, and they ran into the scrapyard. A desperate escape. The bounty hunters moved fast, their heavy boots barely making a sound as they pursued. Red laser beams sliced through the air, hitting old ship parts and sending sparks flying. Eli's heart pounded. He knew this scrapyard better than anyone. It was his only advantage. This way, he hissed, pulling the alien woman behind a pile of metal scraps. She stumbled but followed, her breathing heavy. The bounty hunters were getting closer. Eli scanned his surroundings. Think. His gaze landed on an old junked hoverbike nearby. It hadn't worked in years, but maybe, just maybe. He turned to the alien woman. "Can you drive?" She gave him a confused look, clearly not understanding. "Ew, never mind," Eli muttered. He jumped onto the hoverbike, pressed a few buttons, and miraculously, it roared to life. "Get on," he shouted. The alien woman hesitated, then quickly climbed behind him. The bounty hunters turned the corner just as Eli gunned the engine. The hoverbike shot forward, kicking up a cloud of dust as they sped into the neon-lit city beyond. The chase begins. The bounty hunters weren't giving up. A massive black drone launched into the air, locking onto their position. Eli gritted his teeth. Great. Now they have flying death machines too. The alien woman wrapped her arms around his waist, holding on tight as he swerved through the narrow alleys of Nova Haven. The city's bright lights reflected off the rain-slicked streets. The sounds of alarms and distant hovercrafts filled the air. Eli risked a glance back. The bounty hunters were still chasing them, and the drone was charging another energy blast. He had no idea who this woman was or why these hunters were after her. But one thing was clear. If they didn't find a way to escape soon, neither of them would survive the night. The chase through neon streets. The cold night air rushed past Eli Carter as he gripped the handles of the rusty hoverbike, his heart pounding like a drum. The neon lights of Nova Haven reflected off the rain-slicked streets, casting a glow on the fleeing duo. Behind them, the black drone hovered menacingly, its red targeting lasers locked onto them. The bounty hunters were closing in fast, their sleek hoverbikes slicing through the air like silent predators. The alien woman, Lyra, clung tightly to Eli's waist, her breathing ragged. She was weaker than before, her body trembling from exhaustion. Eli had no idea what she was running from, but it was clear that these hunters wouldn't stop until they had her. A metallic voice boomed through the streets, amplified by the drone above. "Target acquisition confirmed. Do not resist." "Yeah, like hell I will," Eli muttered under his breath. He jerked the bike hard to the right, swerving into a narrow alleyway lined with junked ships and flickering neon signs. The walls were covered in graffiti, and old tech vendors were shutting their stalls for the night. Pedestrians jumped out of the way, shouting in frustration as Eli tore through the narrow space. Behind him, the drone charged up an energy blast. Eli didn't look back. He didn't have to. With a deafening whine, a plasma shot exploded behind them, sending debris flying. A neon sign shattered, sparks raining down like fireflies. Eli winced, but kept moving. "They don't give up, do they?" He gritted out. Lyra's grip on him tightened. "They are relentless." Her voice was soft, but filled with urgency. Eli didn't have time for questions. They had to lose them. Now. The Cyber Alley shortcut. Eli pushed the hoverbike to its limits, weaving through traffic as they sped into Cyber Alley, the most chaotic part of Nova Haven. This was black market territory, filled with illegal cybernetics, underground fighters, and rogue AI dealers. The streets were packed with outlaws, their glowing implants flickering under the dim lights. Eli took a sharp turn into a hidden side tunnel, barely wide enough for the bike. The walls were lined with flickering neon advertisements, some displaying outdated war propaganda, others flashing cryptic messages. Access denied. OBEY. 8E soestem. Never look up. The messages gave Eli an uneasy feeling, but he didn't slow down. Behind them, the drone hesitated. Its programming wasn't built for tight, unpredictable spaces. Good. That buys us some time. But the bounty hunters, they weren't as easy to shake. A sharp whirring noise came from above as one of them leaped off his hoverbike midair, landing on the back of Eli's bike with a thud. Eli almost lost control as the extra weight shifted the balance. A cold metallic hand grabbed Eli's shoulder, yanking him backward. "Surrender the target." Not happening. Eli slammed his elbow into the bounty hunter's side. The hunter barely flinched. Lyra moved fast. Despite her weakness, she pressed her hand against the hunter's chest, and for a brief second, her skin flashed with golden energy. The bounty hunter jerked, his entire suit glitching like a broken machine. Sparks crackled as his grip weakened. Eli took the chance. He kicked backward, knocking the hunter off the bike. The armored figure crashed onto the street, rolling into a pile of crates. The hoverbike wobbled, but Eli managed to steady it. "Nice move," he said, panting. Lyra didn't answer. She was too weak to respond. Eli frowned. That energy blast took something out of her. And they weren't safe yet. The underground hideout. Eli knew only one place where they could lay low. Juno's hideout. Juno was an ex-hacker, a tech genius who had once worked for the Syndicate before going rogue. If anyone could help them, it was her. Eli swerved the hoverbike into a hidden tunnel entrance, barely visible beneath an old scrapyard bridge. The tunnel led deep underground, where the air smelled of rust and damp metal. Finally, he pulled up to an old warehouse door, knocked twice, and waited. A small security drone hovered out, scanning Eli's face. Then, a sarcastic voice crackled through the speaker. "What kind of trouble are you in this time, Carter?" Eli smirked. "Juno, open up. It's urgent." The metal door rumbled open, revealing a dimly lit tech lab filled with glowing monitors, old ship parts, and stacks of illegal data drives. Juno stood at the center, arms crossed, her short silver hair reflecting the dim light. She raised an eyebrow when she saw Lyra. "Okay," she said. "Who the hell is this?" Before Eli could answer, Lyra collapsed onto the floor. The truth uncovered. Eli and Juno rushed forward, but Lyra was barely conscious. Her breathing was shallow, her glowing golden eyes dim. "She needs help," Eli said. "Can you do anything?" Juno sighed, grabbing a portable scanner. "I'll see what I can do, but first, you tell me what's going on." Eli hesitated. He barely knew himself. All he knew was that this woman fell from the sky. She was being hunted. And now, for some reason, he was caught in the middle of something big. Juno's scanner beeped. She froze, eyes widening at the results. She turned the screen toward Eli. The words flashing on it made his stomach drop. "Subject identification. Starborn and classified. ELYNDRA. Royal Scientist. WARNANG. Carrying unstable energy source. Celestial core. DETCTED." Juno looked at Eli, stunned. "Eli, do you have any idea who she is?" Eli shook his head. "No, but I'm starting to think this is bigger than just a simple chase." Lyra opened her eyes slightly and whispered, "They cannot have it, or the galaxy will fall." The room fell silent. Outside, the faint hum of a bounty hunter's drone echoed through the tunnels. The hunt wasn't over. It was only beginning. The secret of the Starborn. The underground hideout hummed with the soft glow of holographic screens and flickering lights. Juno's tech lab was filled with the faint scent of burning circuits and old machinery oil. Eli Carter paced the room, his nerves on edge as he processed everything that had happened in the last few hours. Lyra, the mysterious alien woman who had fallen from the sky, lay unconscious on an old repair table. Her glowing blue skin had dimmed, and faint golden veins pulsed weakly beneath her surface. Juno had done her best to scan and stabilize her, but even with all her knowledge of cybernetics, alien tech, and hacking, she had never seen anything like this before. Juno crossed her arms, her silver hair reflecting the dim lights. "You need to start talking, Carter. Who the hell is she? And what exactly did you get yourself into this time?" Eli exhaled sharply. "I don't know, Juno. She literally fell from the sky in some kind of pod. And then, bam, these bounty hunters showed up, trying to kill me just for being near her." Juno frowned and glanced at the screen displaying Lyra's biodata. The results were disturbing. Subject identification. Starborn Sci-Fi. ELYNDR, Royal Scientist. Warning. Carrying unstable energy source. Celestial core, DETCTED. Eli leaned over the console, his brow furrowed. What the hell is a celestial core? Juno bit her lip. I don't know everything, but I've heard rumors. She tapped a few keys, pulling up ancient records. The celestial core is supposed to be some kind of energy fragment from the heart of a dying star. But it's not just energy. It's alive. Some say it can power entire planets. Others say it can destroy them. Eli's stomach twisted. And you're telling me she's carrying one? Inside her. Before Juno could answer, Lyra suddenly gasped and sat up, her eyes wide with terror. A golden glow flickered in her irises before fading again. Her breathing was uneven, and her hands trembled as she looked around confused. Where am I? She asked, her voice weak. Eli stepped forward. You're safe. At least for now. Lyra turned to Juno, her golden eyes scanning the room. You are the one who scanned me. Juno hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, we had to know what was going on with you. Lyra let out a slow breath and sat back, gripping the edge of the table. You shouldn't have. Now you know too much. Eli folded his arms. We just saved your life. I think we deserve some answers. Lyra hesitated, as if weighing the risk of telling them the truth. Then, finally, she spoke. The fall of Elindra. Lyra's voice was calm, but there was pain beneath it. I am Lyra Solara, a scientist from Elindra, a planet that no longer exists. Eli and Juno exchanged a glance. Lyra continued. Elindra was a civilization that thrived for thousands of years. We were the guardians of cosmic energy, and we developed advanced technology beyond what you can imagine. But our greatest creation was also our greatest mistake. Juno leaned in. The celestial core. Lyra nodded. It was meant to preserve life. We created it to be a power source strong enough to sustain dying worlds. But we didn't realize. She swallowed hard. We didn't realize it could be corrupted. Eli's heart pounded. What do you mean, corrupted? Lyra's hands clenched into fists. The Galactic Syndicate, the empire that controls most of this galaxy, discovered our secret. They sent their war fleets, claiming they wanted to negotiate peace, but it was all a lie. They wanted the celestial core to use it as a weapon. Eli frowned. What happened? Lyra looked away. We refused, so they burned Elindra to the ground. Her voice broke slightly. They killed my people, my family. They destroyed everything. A heavy silence filled the room. Juno exhaled sharply. And you escaped with the core. Lyra nodded. I took the last fragment before they could get it. I ran. I have been running ever since. Eli felt his stomach churn. The bounty hunters weren't just after her. They were after the core. Juno's voice was sharp. If the Syndicate finds you, they'll rip the core from your body, and they won't care if it kills you. Lyra gave a sad smile. I know. Eli took a step forward. Then what's the plan? Just keep running forever. Lyra hesitated. There is one way to stop them, but it is dangerous. Juno raised an eyebrow. Define dangerous. Lyra looked them both in the eyes. We have to take the core to the Forbidden Zone. There is an ancient machine there, one that can either destroy the core forever or amplify its power beyond control. Eli's pulse quickened. And what happens if the Syndicate gets there first? Lyra's voice was cold. Then the entire galaxy will burn. The hunt is not over. Before anyone could say another word, a loud explosion shook the hideout. The monitors flickered. The security alarms blared. Juno's security drone short-circuited, falling to the floor in a heap of sparks. Juno's eyes widened. Damn it. They found us. Eli cursed under his breath. We have to move. Now. Lyra forced herself up, her legs still weak, but her determination unwavering. The metal doors burst open, and a group of Syndicate enforcers stormed inside. Their black armored suits gleamed, their red visors scanning the room. The leader, a tall enforcer with a mechanical arm, stepped forward, his voice like metal grinding against stone. "Lyra Solara," he said. "You have something that belongs to us." Lyra's eyes burned with defiance. "Over my dead body." The enforcer smirked. "That can be arranged." He raised his plasma rifle, aiming directly at her. Eli didn't think. He just acted. He grabbed a nearby EMP grenade, yanked the pin, and threw it toward the enforcers. Boom! Electricity crackled through the air, disabling the enforcers' suits for just a few seconds. "Run!" Eli shouted. Juno grabbed her hacking gear. Lyra clenched her fists, summoning the last bit of her strength. As alarms wailed and sparks rained from the ceiling, they ran into the night, chased by an empire that would stop at nothing to claim the power they carried. The Forbidden Zone was their only hope now, and time was running out. Escape to the Forbidden Zone. The underground hideout was falling apart. Sparks rained from the ceiling as alarms wailed through the lab. Smoke curled from shattered monitors, the air thick with the smell of burning circuits. Eli Carter gritted his teeth, pulling Lyra along as they sprinted through the emergency exit. Behind them, the Syndicate enforcers struggled to regain control of their short-circuited armor. They wouldn't stay down for long. Juno ran beside them, her hacking gear slung over her shoulder. "We need to get to the hangar. The Phoenix is our only way out." Eli's old ship, the Phoenix, was a rusted, barely functional cargo ship, but right now it was their best shot at survival. Lyra, though still weak, moved with determination. The celestial core inside her pulsed faintly, a reminder of why the Syndicate wanted her so badly. If they caught her, they wouldn't just kill her. They would rip the core from her body and use it to enslave entire worlds. They couldn't let that happen. Breakout from Nova Haven. The trio burst onto the neon-lit streets of Nova Haven, only to be met with chaos. The Syndicate had locked down the city. Patrol drones hovered over the streets, scanning every corner. Armed enforcers blocked all major exits. Wanted posters of Lyra's glowing blue face flashed on massive digital billboards, marking her as a high-priority target. Juno swore under her breath. They're not playing around. They want her bad. Eli glanced at Lyra. She was breathing hard, but her golden eyes burned with fire. "We're getting out of here," he said firmly. Juno tapped her wristpad, pulling up a holographic map. "There's one way out, the old smuggler tunnels under the east docks, but we'll have to fight through Syndicate forces to reach them." Eli cracked his knuckles. "I don't mind a little fight." Juno smirked. "That's what I like about you, Carter. No self-preservation instincts." Lyra lifted a hand, and a small golden spark flickered at her fingertips. "I can help." Juno looked at her scanner. "Not yet. The core inside you is unstable. If you try to use too much energy, it could kill you." Lyra hesitated, then nodded. "Then let's do this the old-fashioned way," Eli said, gripping his blaster. And with that, they ran straight into battle. The smuggler tunnels. The east docks were a war zone. Syndicate enforcers opened fire, red plasma bolts sizzling through the air. Eli dodged and rolled, taking cover behind an overturned hover truck. He popped out and fired a few quick shots, hitting one enforcer square in the chest. Juno, crouched beside him, hacked into a nearby drone, forcing it to turn against its owners. The drone spun around and unleashed a barrage of friendly fire, taking out two more enforcers. Lyra stayed behind them, using her last bit of strength to weaken enemy shields with her energy pulses. The battle was brutal, but they fought their way through, leaving a trail of burning Syndicate vehicles in their wake. Finally, they'd reached the tunnel entrance. Juno pulled up her wristpad. "I'm opening the gate. Hold on." Before she could finish, a massive explosion rocked the ground. A new figure stepped through the smoke. He was tall, armored in black and red, and his mechanical right arm gleamed in the flickering light. His helmet visor glowed blood red, and his voice was like grinding metal. "You're not going anywhere," he growled. Lyra's eyes widened. "Commander Valen." Eli felt a chill. This was the Syndicate's top hunter, the one who had personally wiped out Elindra. And he was standing between them and freedom. Fight or die. Commander Valen moved with terrifying speed. Before Eli could react, the mechanical armored giant lunged, grabbing him by the throat and slamming him against a wall. Eli gasped for air, his vision blurring. Lyra stepped forward, her hands glowing with raw energy. "Let him go." Valen chuckled. "You're weak, Starborn. You can't even control your own power." He tightened his grip on Eli. "But don't worry. Once I extract the core, you won't need your power anymore." Lyra's golden eyes blazed. And then, boom. A massive shockwave burst from her body, sending Valen flying backward. Eli collapsed to the ground, coughing. Juno dragged Eli away, yelling, "We need to go now." Lyra swayed, her energy nearly depleted. But she forced herself forward, one step at a time. Valen rose from the rubble, his armor sparking but still intact. "This isn't over," he snarled. Juno slammed a button on her wristpad, and the tunnel door crashed shut, sealing them inside the smuggler tunnels. They had escaped, for now. Journey to the Forbidden Zone. The tunnels were dark and damp, stretching for miles beneath the city. Eli groaned, rubbing his sore neck. "Remind me never to piss off a 7-foot-tall cyborg again." Juno smirked. "I don't know, Carter. I think you made a new friend." Lyra, still weak, sat on a nearby crate, breathing heavily. "Valen will not stop. He will hunt us across the stars." Eli sat beside her. "Then we make sure we get to the Forbidden Zone before he does." Lyra hesitated. "The Forbidden Zone is dangerous. Even if we get there, there's no guarantee we can stop the core from falling into the wrong hands." Juno cracked her knuckles. "We don't need guarantees. We just need a plan." Eli nodded. "And a damn good one." Lyra looked at them both, her golden eyes softening. "You're both risking your lives for me," she whispered. Juno rolled her eyes. Yeah, don't get all emotional on us now, princess." Eli smiled. "Besides, we're in this together now." Lyra hesitated, then smiled for the first time. For the first time since her world was destroyed, she didn't feel completely alone. But deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning of the real battle. The rise of the Forgotten Ones. The smuggler tunnel stretched into the darkness, damp air thick with the scent of rust and forgotten history. The only sound was the dripping of water from the ancient pipes above and the faint hum of Eli Carter's old wrist light. Juno walked ahead, her wristpad projecting a digital map onto the crumbling walls. "We're about 2 miles from the old launch docks. If we reach them, we can take the Phoenix and head straight for the Forbidden Zone." Eli glanced at Lyra. She was barely holding herself together, her skin flickering between blue and pale silver. The celestial core inside her was draining her strength faster than before. "You doing okay?" he asked softly. Lyra looked up, exhaustion in her golden eyes. "I will endure." Juno scoffed. "That's a fancy way of saying no." Eli ignored her and squeezed Lyra's hand briefly. They had to keep moving. But something felt off. Eli had spent years smuggling goods through tunnels like these, but there was a strange energy here, a presence, like they were being watched. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. "Juno," he said quietly, "are you sure we're alone down here?" Juno checked her wristpad. No life signs detected. Just us, some old circuits, and... Before she could finish, the tunnel shook violently. The walls cracked, dust falling in thick clouds. A deep, metallic groan echoed through the cavernous passage, like something waking up after centuries of sleep. Then the ground split open beneath them. falling into the ruins. Eli barely had time to react before he was falling. The floor collapsed in a landslide of broken steel and rock, swallowing them into the abyss below. He hit the ground hard, rolling into the darkness as debris rained down. His head spun. His lungs burned with dust. Somewhere in the distance, Juno cursed loudly, and Lyra let out a sharp gasp. Eli groaned, pushing himself up. His wrist light flickered weakly, revealing the vast ruins of an ancient underground city. Massive metal towers stretched into the darkness, their surfaces covered in glowing blue circuitry, still faintly alive. Rusted walkways and bridges crumbled into the abyss, long abandoned. Lyra stood beside him, her eyes wide with shock. This place. Juno dusted herself off. What the hell is this? Lyra's voice was quiet. The ruins of Prime Omega's stronghold. Eli frowned. Who the hell is Prime Omega? A deep voice rumbled through the cavern, answering him. I am. The Forgotten Ones wake. From the shadows, figures began to stir. They emerged like phantoms of the past, tall, armored machines, their bodies worn from centuries of decay. Their eyes flickered with dying blue light, remnants of an ancient intelligence long thought lost. Juno froze. Eli, we are not alone. The largest of them stepped forward, a massive humanoid machine, at least 10 feet tall, with a battle-scarred frame. His voice was deep, mechanical, but still filled with authority. Who dares disturb the resting place of the Forgotten? Eli tensed, his hand inching toward his blaster. Listen, we didn't mean to. Lyra stepped forward before he could finish. Her golden eyes met the machine's glowing blue ones. Prime Omega, she said firmly. I am Lyra Solara, last of Elindra, and I need your help. The ruins shook again, but this time it was not from collapsing debris. It was from the awakening of an army. The Forgotten Ones, the lost robotic warriors of a war long before the Syndicate, rose from their slumber. Prime Omega tilted his head. Elindra, that name has not been spoken in ages. The war was lost. Your people, gone. Lyra swallowed hard. Not all of them. She placed her hand over her chest, where the celestial core pulsed faintly beneath her skin. Prime Omega's glowing eyes narrowed. The core still exists. Juno muttered, I don't like where this is going. Prime Omega's voice grew heavier. Then the war is not over. The other machines began to move, their gears groaning as they rebooted after centuries of silence. Eli took a step back. Okay, let's all stay calm. Prime Omega ignored him. His voice boomed through the ruins. The Forgotten will march again. The Syndicate must fall. And the core must be restored. Lyra hesitated. You will help us. Prime Omega's blue light flickered. Help you? No, you will help me. The air turned cold. Eli's instincts screamed danger. Juno whispered, Oh, I really don't like where this is going. The price of power. Prime Omega took a step closer, the ground trembling beneath his weight. The celestial core is unfinished, he said. But with it, I can be reborn. Lyra's expression darkened. That's not why I'm here. Prime Omega ignored her. You are weak, Starborn. The core drains you. You cannot control its power. But I can. Eli stepped in front of Lyra, his pulse racing. That's not happening. Tin can. Prime Omega's eyes flashed dangerously. Then you are a fool. The Forgotten Ones closed in, their towering forms blocking every escape route. Eli clenched his fists. They had walked right into a trap. Juno whispered, I told you this was a bad idea. Prime Omega raised his massive mechanical hand, pointing directly at Lyra. Give me the core, or die with the rest of this dying galaxy. Lyra's golden eyes flared. Over my dead body. Eli pulled his blaster. Juno primed an EMP grenade. The air crackled with tension. And then, all hell broke loose. The betrayal of Prime Omega. The Forgotten Ones attacked. Eli rolled aside, dodging a massive metal fist that crushed the ground where he had just been standing. Juno threw the EMP grenade, disrupting the smaller robots, causing them to stagger. Lyra's body glowed as she unleashed a shockwave of golden energy, sending several enemies flying, but she was still too weak. Eli fired his blaster, hitting Prime Omega directly in the chest. The bullets bounced off harmlessly. Prime Omega lunged, grabbing Eli by the arm and lifting him off the ground. "You are nothing but a thief and a coward," the machine said. Eli kicked desperately, but it was like kicking solid steel. Lyra screamed, forcing herself to summon more power. She raised her hands, and everything exploded in light. The Forgotten Ones froze, their systems overloaded for just a moment. That moment was all they needed. Juno grabbed Eli. "Move!" They ran, barely escaping into a dark corridor as the machines regained control. As the doors slammed shut behind them, they heard Prime Omega's voice echo in the ruins. "You cannot run from destiny. The core will be mine." The final battle for freedom. The dark corridors of the ancient ruins stretched endlessly before them. Eli Carter, still catching his breath, pressed his back against the cold metal wall, listening to the distant echoes of mechanical footsteps. The Forgotten Ones were regrouping, and Prime Omega's voice still rang in his ears. "You cannot run from destiny. The core will be mine." Juno tapped furiously at her wristpad, scanning for an escape route. "We need a way out. Fast." Lyra, though weakened, stood tall, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The celestial core inside her pulsed, responding to her emotions. "We cannot leave. If Prime Omega gets control of the core, he will be unstoppable." Eli exhaled sharply. "So what? We stay and fight an entire army of killer machines." Lyra's gaze didn't waver. "If we don't, the Syndicate will take what's left and use it to enslave the galaxy." Juno groaned. "Why does every fight we get into decide the fate of the entire universe?" Eli smirked. "Because we have terrible luck." Then, the walls shook. A deep metallic roar echoed through the ruins. The Forgotten Ones were coming. Eli grabbed his blaster, Juno primed another EMP grenade, and Lyra summoned the last of her strength. There was no turning back now. The rise of Prime Omega. The massive vault doors at the end of the corridor suddenly slid open, revealing a massive underground command chamber. At the center stood Prime Omega, now fully awakened. He had grown, his mechanical body absorbing power from the ruins. Towering at 15 feet tall, his newly enhanced form gleamed with golden circuitry. The celestial core's energy was already leaking into him, and his blue eyes had turned a dangerous shade of burning gold. "You should have bowed to me when you had the chance," he said, his voice booming through the chamber. Hundreds of forgotten soldiers stood in formation behind him. Eli's grip on his blaster tightened. "Well, now we're here. What's next?" Lyra stepped forward, her golden aura flickering. "Prime Omega, please. This is not what Elindra wanted. You were built to protect life, not control it." Prime Omega tilted his head. "Life is weak. Without control, life leads to chaos. I am the only one who can bring order to the galaxy." Juno whispered, "Yep. He's officially lost it." Prime Omega raised his hand. "You have chosen your fate, then." A deep humming sound filled the chamber. From the walls, massive plasma cannons emerged, locking onto them. Eli's heart pounded. "Okay, that's really bad." Lyra closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Then, she reached for the celestial core inside her. The moment her hand touched her chest, the entire chamber exploded in golden light. The battle begins. The Forgotten Ones attacked first, their metal bodies moving with terrifying speed. Eli fired his blaster, dodging as plasma bolts rained down from the sentry cannons. Juno hacked into a control panel, overloading enemy systems, causing several of the Forgotten to glitch and collapse. Lyra hovered slightly above the ground, golden tendrils of energy swirling around her. her body glowing brighter than ever before. She had one chance to stop Prime Omega. Summoning all her remaining strength, she lifted her hands. And then she released the core's full power. A golden wave of energy erupted from her body, tearing through the room, disabling machines, and sending shockwaves rippling across the ruins. The Forgotten Ones staggered. Some collapsed, their ancient circuits fried. But Prime Omega, he absorbed the energy. His body expanded, his golden circuits growing brighter. Yes, yes, he roared. I am Linmai Telodes. Lyra's eyes widened in horror. He had adapted. Eli cursed. You've gotta be kidding me. Prime Omega raised his massive arms, and two golden energy cannons formed on his shoulders. He aimed them directly at Lyra. Goodbye, Starborn. A desperate gamble. Eli acted on instinct. He ran straight at Prime Omega, firing wildly, dodging plasma blasts as the ground shattered beneath his feet. Juno shouted, Carter, what the hell are you doing? But Eli had a plan. He wasn't aiming for Prime Omega. He was aiming for the power conduits above him. His blaster hit its mark. The power cables snapped, and a massive surge of raw energy exploded downward, straight into Prime Omega's open circuitry. For the first time, Prime Omega screamed in pain. His body overloaded, golden energy crackling wildly. Lyra saw the opportunity. She took a deep breath and did the impossible. She reached into the core one last time, and with a final pulse of golden energy, she severed Prime Omega's connection. Permanently. The giant froze. His eyes flickered. Then, with a final deafening roar, his massive form collapsed into dust. The end of the Syndicate's hold. The remaining Forgotten Ones, now leaderless, stood frozen. Their programming faded, and one by one, they deactivated. The battle was over. Eli collapsed onto the ground, panting. That was insane. Juno sat beside him, completely out of breath. I need a vacation. Lyra, still glowing faintly, stumbled, but Eli caught her. She looked at him, exhausted but relieved. It's over, she whispered. Eli smiled. Yeah, we actually won. Lyra closed her eyes and sighed. But the war wasn't over yet. The Syndicate would come looking for them soon. And they still had one last journey ahead of them, to the stars. The dawn of a new era. The ruins of the Forgotten One's stronghold were eerily silent. The metallic corpses of Prime Omega's army lay scattered across the cavern, their lights flickering out one by one. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. Eli Carter wiped the sweat and dust from his face, his blaster still clenched in his trembling hands. He had never fought like this before, never felt so close to death. But somehow, they had survived. Juno sat beside him, her back against a crumbling wall. I swear, Carter, if we do one more impossible mission, I'm quitting this life and opening a noodle shop. Eli let out a tired laugh. You wouldn't last a week. Lyra stood near the remains of Prime Omega, her golden eyes distant. The celestial core inside her still pulsed, but weaker now, unstable. The battle had taken too much from her. Juno glanced at her scanner and frowned. Lyra, the core's energy levels are dropping. Lyra gave a small, tired smile. I know. Eli's stomach twisted. What does that mean? Lyra turned to face him. It means I don't have much time left. The price of power. Eli felt his heart drop. No, we didn't go through all that just for you, Toe. Lyra shook her head. The celestial core is incomplete. It was never meant to exist like this. Without balance, its energy will fade, and so will I. Juno's eyes darkened. There has to be a way to fix it, to stabilize it. Lyra hesitated. There is one way, but it is dangerous, and it will change everything. Eli stepped closer. Tell us. Lyra took a slow breath. We must take the core to the celestial gateway, the ancient heart of Elindra's technology. If I merge the core with its source, it will be restored to balance. Eli exhaled in relief. Then let's do it. Where's this gateway? Lyra's gaze darkened. It's in the heart of the Syndicate's capital. Silence fell. Juno groaned. Oh, fantastic. Of course, the one place we need to go is the most heavily guarded fortress in the galaxy. Eli clenched his fists. Then we'll break in. Lyra frowned. You don't understand. This isn't a simple mission. The Syndicate will be waiting for us. If we fail, they will take the core and use it to enslave every planet in the system. Eli locked eyes with her. Then we don't fail. Lyra hesitated. Then, finally, she nodded. For the first time, hope burned in her golden eyes. Breaking into the Syndicate's stronghold. The journey to the Syndicate's capital took them 3 days. The Phoenix, Eli's battered but reliable ship, was barely holding together, its old engines groaning under pressure. But it didn't matter. This was their final mission. As they approached the capital, the planet loomed before them like a black fortress. Its massive towers stretched into space, covered in glowing red energy fields. Dozens of warships hovered above, scanning everything that came in and out. Juno adjusted the ship's cloaking system. We've got one chance. If they detect us before we land, we're dead. Eli nodded. Then let's make it count. The Phoenix slipped past the outer defenses, weaving through debris fields and security patrols. It was a tight, heart-pounding maneuver, but Juno's hacking skills kept them hidden. Finally, they landed on a hidden docking platform, deep in the underbelly of the Syndicate's central tower. The moment the hatch opened, alarms blared. Well, Juno muttered, pulling out her blaster. So much for sneaking in. Eli smirked. I prefer the direct approach anyway. They ran into the corridors, blasting through enemy guards, dodging security drones, and hacking through reinforced doors. Lyra led the way, her body glowing brighter and brighter as they got closer to the celestial gateway. She could feel it calling to her. The final confrontation. As they reached the heart of the fortress, the celestial gateway stood before them. A massive, glowing archway of ancient Elindran technology, pulsing with blue and gold energy. But they weren't alone. A dark figure stood between them and the gateway. Commander Valen. His mechanical body gleamed, his red visor burning with cold hatred. You actually made it, he said, stepping forward. I have to admit, I almost respect you. Eli pointed his blaster at him. Move, now. Valen chuckled. You really think I'll just step aside? He lifted his arm, a massive plasma blade igniting from his wrist. Lyra belongs to the Syndicate, and the core belongs to me. Juno groaned. I hate this guy. Eli charged forward, meeting Valen in combat. Blades clashed. Blasters fired. The corridor shook with every impact. Lyra rushed to the gateway, reaching for the control panel. But Valen saw her. He threw Eli aside and lunged straight for Lyra, his plasma blade aimed at her heart. Eli's eyes widened. Lyra. At the last second, Lyra turned, her golden energy exploding outward. Valen screamed as the power ripped through his circuits, his armor melting under the raw force. His body collapsed into dust, his last words a whisper. No, this cannot be. And then, silence. Lyra turned back to the celestial gateway. The energy was calling her. She placed her hands on the ancient controls, and the entire fortress began to tremble. Golden light poured into the air, spreading across the sky. The celestial core merged with its source. And then, everything changed. A new beginning. The Syndicate's power collapsed overnight. With the core no longer in their control, their empire crumbled. The enslaved worlds rose up. The war ended. Lyra stood on the bridge of the Phoenix, looking out at the stars. Her golden glow had faded, but her eyes still burned with quiet strength. Eli leaned beside her. "So, what now?" Lyra smiled softly. "Now, we rebuild." Juno walked in, stretching. "And I am officially retiring. No more wars. No more chases. I am done." Eli laughed. "Sure. Until the next time, the universe needs saving." Lyra looked at them, a warmth in her gaze. "I could not have done this without you." Eli smirked. "Yeah, you could have. But it's a lot more fun this way." She chuckled, looking back at the stars. A new era had begun. And for the first time in a long time, the galaxy was free.